I think your value proposition for anyone is really important to identify, and it could change over the years. If you remember with Ronnie Lott, it was, I have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to devote to you. With SHAQ, what Howard pointed out was we're going to transform, and you actually talked about it earlier, we're going to transform the way athletes are marketed. Instead of endorsing products, you're going to own your own IP, you're going to license it out, and you're going to grow value, and you're going to become an institution. Mm-hmm. And, I think the key is identify your value proposition, your brand positioning, and then make sure all communications are consistent with that. And then the final point would be, if you can build a coalition of marketing partners, which is what David Stern taught me about, you can actually create tremendous value in your brand using other people's money.
I love that. Welcome to Icons and Insights powered by C360, where the business of sports, technology, and broadcasting converge to create the immersive media economy. Now let's get into it with your hosts, Howard Wright and Cher Jones. Today's icon is considered a visionary leader, a trailblazer in sports and entertainment, and definitely a legend in the sports marketing game. He literally transformed the way athletes and celebrities were marketed by masterminding the development and launch of Shaquille O'Neal's brand, which evolved the superstar from athlete to institution and, of course, tech leader. So this is exciting stuff, Howard. I love hanging out with you because I get to meet all your cool friends. And this one is no exception to the rule of cool and definitely an icon. So tell me a little bit more about our icon today.
Leonard Armato. I call him LA, and he was almost my agent when I was playing in the NBA, and ended up representing just an amazing cadre of players, including Shaquille O'Neal, that not only had great careers on the basketball court, but iconic careers in their business lives as well. And that was in part due to Leonard. Our guest today, Leonard, I think of him as a fearless entrepreneur, and his kind of track record and resume speaks to that very loudly.
All right, well, let's bring Leonard on. Welcome to the show, Leonard. How are you?
Well, I'm fine. It's such a pleasure to be here. Such an honor to be in the presence of two distinguished, accomplished individuals. So I appreciate you having me.
Well, game recognized game. And one thing I want to get right into is okay, so we know where you are at right now. You're doing awesome things with your company, but let's get into the origin story.
All right.
How did, we see how it's going, but how did it start?
Well, when I started in sports management, or really I was a sports agent at first, and I was a lawyer who was really unhappy. And I wanted to be in sports, and I had played basketball in college, and not quite as accomplished as Howard. I wasn't an All-American, but I was a starting point guard, and I held some records for assists because I'm a very generous kind of guy. I always like to spread the wealth to other people. So I wanted to help people because my dad was a university professor, but they didn't make a lot of money. So I went to law school. I figured I'd get a law degree. I could figure it out later. But I knew with a law degree, I could be financially rewarded as well as being able to help people. So my college basketball coach said, well, you should be representing athletes. And I said, okay. He says, they're really getting screwed by all these shyster agents. So you should step in because you're credible and you have integrity. And I said, well, I don't have a client. And he said, well, you'll figure it out. You'll figure out how to get a client. I'll set you up with a meeting. And so he set me up with a meeting with a guy who was coming out of USC, University of Southern California, a football player who's going to go at the top of the NFL draft. He's actually legendary and was actually voted the greatest defensive back in the history of the NFL. His name is Ronnie Lott. Now, for anybody that lives in the Bay Area, I know Howard is very familiar with Ronnie Lott. He's a legend. He's an incredible individual, been successful on the field, off the field, and there's nobody that doesn't respect Ronnie Lott. Yeah. But at the time, he was coming out of USC, and he was recruited by every single big agent in the business. So I had no idea how I was going to secure him as a client because I had no experience. So my coach said, look, you'll figure it out. You're resourceful. I'll set up the meeting. Just get in there and convince him. He said, focus on your value proposition. Your value proposition is what makes you special. What sets you apart from everybody else. Cher, what sets you apart? Exactly. That curly hair, those brains, that charisma. Howard, like you said, he's tall. He's tall. I walked into this meeting with Ronnie Lott. It's my lunch meeting. I sit down, I'm looking at him, looking at me. He said, look, I got some questions because I've been interviewing agents. Okay. My first question is, name your clients. And I sat there and nothing came out. And I said, well, I don't have any clients. And he looked at me like, huh? And then he said, well, what kind of accomplishments do you have in sports that I can feel confident that you could be a great agent for me? And I was sitting there for a while, couldn't think of anything. I said, I don't have any accomplishments, but I'm really eager. I'm really willing. I have great integrity. I understand the mindset of an athlete. And he kind of looked at me and he goes, look, you seem like a nice guy, but this meeting probably should end soon because I don't see a finish line for you here other than, we'll shake hands and walk away. I said, listen, let me ask you a couple questions before we end the meeting. He goes, all right. You get a couple questions. I said, number one, what are your goals as an athlete? And he said, well, I want to be the best defensive back ever. I said, wow, that's an incredible goal. And I said, well, what's your goals off the field? And he said, well, I want to be a successful businessman. I want to own car dealerships. Because at the time, if you own car dealerships, you're a successful athlete, right? And then I said, well, do you have any other goals and aspirations? He says, I want to help the community. I want to help young people, underprivileged kids. I want to give back. I said, wow, those are three amazing goals. But just think about this, Ronnie. If you were to go with one of those fancy agents with 20, 30, 40, 50 clients, and they treated you equally like they would the rest of their clients, they'd have like 5, 6, 7 minutes a day to spend on your goals and aspirations. Me, on the other hand, I got 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and all I will do is focus on you and your goals and aspirations in your career and in your life. And he looked at me and goes, that's a really nice thing to say, but you have no experience and I have no confidence that you could represent me like any of those other guys. I said, well, look, let me make you an offer you can't refuse. I said, I will work for you for free for 30 days. I will prove to you that I'm better than anybody else for you. And if at the end of 30 days, you don't agree, you don't believe I'm the best, I'll walk away. You owe me nothing. You have no obligation. What do you think? He looked at me like kind of sheepishly and he goes, well, why don't you ask my parents if they like that idea? So I said, where are your parents? They said, well, they're about an hour from here in Rialto, California, which is about 60 miles east of Los Angeles, where we were having our meeting. I said, I'm jumping in my car right now. I'm going to go see your parents. Jumped in my car, sat down. Mr. and Mrs. Lott, I just met with your son. I told him I'd work for him for free for 30 days to prove myself to him. Are you on board with that? No obligation. He looked at me like, what a nice young man. He believes in himself. He's willing to work for free to prove himself. That sounds like a good idea. And so I picked up on Ronnie. Your parents say it's a good idea. We're working together for the next 30 days. I'm going to prove myself to you. So for the next 30 days, I every day I was picking him up, taking him to a meeting, giving him research. And so that's how I got my first client.
So I hope this doesn't sound crass, LA, but that's $100 million pivot or more in your life in terms of the deals that you negotiated for him and others and SHAQ. Eventually, you were there to meet your moment with all the integrity, with all the enthusiasm, and put your career in the hands of your own ability to deliver for your client. That's just this. I've heard the story multiple times, but every time I hear it, it gets better. Okay, so Cher. Now I come out of Stanford in 1989. I'm going to get drafted in the second round, but I'm going to, probably be a free agent. There's a handful of agents that my father was still alive at the time that he allowed me to talk to. I ended up signing originally with Fred Slaughter. Rest in peace, Fred Slaughter was a good guy, had great NBA connections. But that first year in the NBA, I kept seeing Leonard everywhere. He was down in Orlando. He was out in Phoenix. He was out in New York. It was this weird thing where I wasn't big enough for him to really spend any significant time to recruit me. But I said, there's something about that guy. I wonder if I was ever lucky enough to get, in position to have a multi-year contract, maybe I'll have Leonard negotiate my next deal. Oh. Lo and behold, the next year, SHAQ is a rookie and his agent is Leonard. So how did you go down to Louisiana, Baton Rouge? How did you secure that partnership? Because you had a handful of NBA players, but you didn't have any NBA players at that stature at that time, Leonard.
Well, I got Kareem Abdul-Jabbar at the end of his career and kind of helped him get back on his feet. And then I had Akeem Olajuwon, who wasn't so bad. So I had some pretty good players, and I had Kevin Johnson. So, I mean, I had some pretty good players, but Shaq was coming out of school, and everyone knew he was going to be the next incredible player, and everybody wanted him. So I went down, and my former basketball coach, a guy named Stan Morrison, who coached at USC and University of the Pacific, was very good friends with Dale Brown, the coach of LSU. So I went down to see Dale, and I didn't even really know who Shaquille O'Neal was, but everybody in the know knew he was going to be the next great player. So when Shaq was 17 years old and a freshman at LSU, I was in Dale's office, and Dale took a liking to me, and he said, "You need to meet this kid. He's going to be the next great player." I said, "Okay." So all of a sudden, he sent one of his managers down to the practice facility. Up comes Shaquille O'Neal and Stanley Roberts. You remember Stanley Roberts?
I do remember Stanley. I played against him in Madrid.
Yeah, 7'2", Shaquille 7'1" at the time. And these two giant guys are like standing in front of me. Dale Brown, Leonard Armato meets Stanley Roberts and Shaquille O'Neal. And Stanley like, "Hi, how you doing?" And Shaquille was like, "Hello, sir. How are you, sir?" Because Shaquille was a military kid. He was taught to be very respectful to his elders. He'd say, "Sir." He was, very shy at the time. And I said, "Okay, nice meeting you." And he left. And so Dale Brown looked at me and he goes, "You got to go through his dad if you want to represent him." And his dad is one tough SOB. His dad, meaning his stepdad, Sergeant Philip Harrison, who was a drill sergeant in the Army at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas. So Dale Brown said, "Phil is difficult to handle, but I'm the one guy that can handle him." So Dale says, "Watch this." Gets on the phone. "Hey, Sergeant Harrison, it's Dale Brown. How you doing?" And they're talking for a while. Then Dale says, "Hey, I need you to meet this guy, Leonard Armato. He's an attorney for Akeem and Kareem. You really like him. Here, meet him." So he hands me the phone. And I said, "Oh, hello, Sergeant Harrison. Very nice to meet you." All of a sudden, I hear this booming voice at the other end of the phone. "I don't like to talk to people over the phone. I don't know them. I want to talk to you eyeball to eyeball." And I said, "Eyeball to eyeball? Yeah, you come down to Fort Sam next Tuesday at 1800 hours, and you meet with me in Madeira." And Madeira is right. Yeah. "Oh, okay, Sergeant Harrison, I'll be down there next Tuesday at 1800 hours. Nice meeting you. Bye." Click. I look at Dale Brown like, "What the heck?" He goes, "Well, you better be down there at 1800 hours on Tuesday." So I went down, and I charmed them in their house. I said, "Listen, all I want to do is provide you information and help you, be a resource for you and Shaquille so that you can sort of navigate the waters over the next few years while he's an amateur athlete at LSU." And they, became close with me over the next couple of years. And eventually, I got to represent Shaquille. So that's kind of the beginning of the story. You haven't heard that story, Howard.
Indeed. And so now share Shaq's rookie year. This was early 90s. Leonard, let's talk, because I looked it up today. The centers were still dominant. This is MJ hasn't won his first of 6 championships. I'm talking about David Robinson, Ronnie Cycli, Alonzo Mourning, Ewing, Mutombo. Tim Duncan comes a little bit later. And the number one, who is Akeem, before he changed his name to Hakeem Olajuwon. Truly gifted in a different sense. I was a crash test dummy for Shaq in his rookie year. There's a ESPN 30 for 30 that Leonard is interviewed extensively on terms of the transition when Shaq got there, and then eventually left to Los Angeles. I'm in that share for all of about 2 seconds, where I go and make the best move I've ever made, throw up my little hook shot. Shaq blocks it to 2 counties away from where we were actually in the practice facility, that old practice facility at in Orlando Magic, right by the gym. Coming back to all that, I sat on the bench, got in a couple games. I saw him just absolutely ragdoll, center after center, big man after big man. Nobody had seen 7'1", 280 pounds, that relentlessness. He is a kid in the locker room and probably when he meets with folks in the boardroom, but an absolute assassin when it came to inside those basketball lanes. Can you talk about the dichotomy, which is Shaq, which is this gregarious, biggest 13-year-old kid ever, and then an absolute monster when it comes to performance and championship?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, Howard, because, I always look at people, and I started kind of thinking about this in my career. How can you work with people that are remarkable? Because if you're working with someone remarkable, then you have great latitude to create things that are innovative. So when I saw Shaq, I thought, wow, that guy's so big and so powerful. But how can we make him remarkable and likable? Because you can be remarkable and people can hate you, and that's not so good. But if you're remarkable and likable, then you have a wide mass audience that loves you, and you can sell products, and you can they'll want to see your content and all that other stuff. So we created this positioning for him, which was a cross between the Terminator and Bambi, the power and the approachability, the steel, grittiness, juxtaposed against sort of the soft-hearted, gentle soul. And that combination, of this assassin and the entertainer who wanted to put a smile on your face worked really well. And you saw that in all the creative that we did, whether it was a Pepsi commercial or a footwear commercial. And, what was really incredible, Howard, is his legend started to spread, because the moment he got in the league, he was breaking backboards. Like, oh my gosh, like I remember before he actually played his first game, Ahmad Rashad did a show, Inside Stuff, featuring Shaq. And I was with him standing there, and Ahmad said, let's play 1-on-1. And Ahmad made a shot from the outside, and Shaq got mad. So he just pushed him aside like a rag doll, went in and dunked, and he shattered the entire backboard and fell on his back. I thought he was going to be seriously.
I thought he was dead. I thought he was dead when I saw that too.
And then you saw what happened in New Jersey. He pulled the thing down. The shot clock almost busted his head open. Then he went to Phoenix on national TV, and he pulled the rim down, and it looked like one of the Transformers.
The entire stanchion came down slowly. It was pretty scary.
It was unbelievable. So, his legend just started to grow and grow and grow. So, it was a really fun time.
So one of the things that, as I'm listening to you talk and I'm trying to pull the little nuggets from what you're saying so far, as far as building those brands, it really came down to nailing their brand through their value proposition, as far as even from yourself and knowing what they bring to the table, that likability factor, which we saw even with Sarge. You had to be likable with the parents meeting. You had to go there and be likable and be approachable. These are all things that people, would you say that most leaders have to find a way to weave into their brand? So knowing their value prop, mastering their message, likability and approachability.
Those are all great points here. In fact, I think your value proposition for anyone is really important to identify, and it could change over the years. If you remember with Ronnie Lott, it was, I have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to devote to you. With Shaq, as Howard pointed out, it was, we're going to transform, and you actually talked about it earlier, we're going to transform the way athletes are marketed. Instead of endorsing products, you're going to own your own IP, you're going to license it out, and you're going to grow value, and you're going to become an institution. And, I think the key is identify your value proposition, your brand positioning, and then make sure all communications are consistent with that. And then the final point would be, if you can build a coalition of marketing partners, which is what David Stern taught me about, you can actually create tremendous value in your brand using other people's money.
I love that. Using other people's money. That is perfect.
So you brought up Commissioner Stern, God rest his soul. We all have great Commissioner Stern stories, but those early days where he was unapologetic about being the smartest guy in the room and would tease folks that he liked. Authentic leadership, folks that you've worked with, folks that you've negotiated with. Adam, Commissioner Stern, Jerry West, all the other GMs and presidents and owners of these clubs. Is there a trait, is there a similarity that you find in them? It's not just ego. The folks that have risen to that level have a unique set of skills, just like certain players had a unique set of skills in basketball. What are the common traits that you find in these folks?
Well, that's really interesting. Styles of leadership vary greatly. And,
Sure.
you know, David Stern's style of leadership was micromanage, rule with fear, but he was the smartest guy in the room always. He's the smartest guy I've ever met. Unbelievable. Knew everybody's job better than they did. But he was just wicked smart and was really, really insightful. You know, Adam Silver, when I was there this first day in the office, he was quiet as a mouse, sat in the corner, hardly said anything. But I figured out soon he was very intelligent and strategic in a quiet way. And he grew under the tutelage of David and learned so much. But Adam, being very strategic, was much different than David. And I think his superpower is his humility. Everybody wants the guy to win. You know, so, you know, this great strategic thinker coupled with humility is a great combination of attributes to have in today's world. You know, somebody like Jerry West just knows basketball better than anybody. I mean, he can just see a superstar in the making. I mean, you know, he recognized Kobe Bryant was going to be an incredible player when he was like 16 years old, and, you know, he couldn't wait to get his hands on him. So, I mean, Jerry was amazing in his own way. He was a very complicated, complex individual, you know, very emotional, you know, wore his, you know, heart on his sleeve, but, you know, what a basketball mind he was.
So then take us through what is, I think this should be studied in business schools throughout the world, Leonard, which is SHAQ is coming to the end of his time in Orlando. Is he going to re-up? Is Pat Williams and the Orlando, you know, Magic franchise going to pay him what he's worth? Is he going to come west to the Lakers? We know the answer to the question, but take us behind the scenes of what happened and all the nuances of, I don't know, Orlando, did they think they were expected to get a hometown discount for a iconic superstar like Shaq to stay there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what they were thinking, because here was the most dominant player in basketball, and they did not offer him a max deal when he became a free agent, which was, to me, unbelievable. They had their reasons for doing it like that, but it sort of opened the door for other people to walk through and make pitches. So, and Jerry West, of course, walked through that door. And, you know, it sort of made Shaq feel, I mean, look, he wanted to re-sign with them. If they would have made a max deal offered him, he would have signed it immediately. But once they did that and other people started talking to him, he started to think, well, do they really want me that much? And why are they treating me with disrespect? I found that most athletes don't care about the actual dollar amount as much as they care about the respect that they're getting. You know, from the money represents respect. You know, it's really just about that. So when the Magic offered Shaq, I think, $80 million, then Jerry West said, well, I want to make an offer. So he traded a player named George Lynch, and he freed up enough cap room to make a $96 million offer. And I told Jerry, I said, look, Alonzo Mourning just signed a contract last week for $100 million. You can't ask Shaq to take less than Alonzo Mourning. And Shaq said the same thing, you know, I'm not taking less than Alonzo Mourning. And again, getting back to the respect issue. So Jerry said to me, look, give me a day. And I said, okay. So Jerry calls me the next day and he says, Leonard, I've done something that's laid myself bare naked out in front of the world. And if you don't accept this offer I'm about to give you, I may jump out of a building because I don't know what I'm going to do. I just traded Vlade Divac, our center, to the Sacramento Kings, and I got from the Charlotte Hornets the 13th pick in the draft, and I'm going to offer you $121 million for Shaq to come to the Lakers. And I said, well, I think that sounds great. I think that's enough. I think that makes him feel respected. Let me go back to him. I said, Shaq, $120 million. He goes, I'm in. $120 million. Yes. So called Jerry. Shaq says yes. And anyway, long story short, we made the deal. But the interesting thing that people don't know is that, or don't realize, is that the 13th pick in the draft that we became Kobe Bryant. So without us forcing the Lakers to make more cap room, Kobe Bryant would have never been a Laker.
Which is crazy.
I'm sorry, Sherry.
Shaq was watching that 30 for 30 the other night, and he texted me. And he texted me like a video of it. And I said, yeah, Kobe would have never been a Laker if we didn't do this. And he said, yeah, the Lakers never thanked me for that.
So you're talking about, you know, extraordinarily large sums of dollars. But if we could bring that back down to corporate America, where you have carved out different, positions of leadership in your own career. I've bounced around a little bit in multinationals in my own career.
Yeah.
Is that almost a cautionary tale for those of us that aren't in that altitude of, which is know your worth and then make sure that the contract or the compensation is, equivalent to how you should be valued inside that organization?
Yeah, I mean, look, my philosophy has always been make yourself indispensable, because then nobody is going to want to let you go. So making yourself indispensable, I mean, in any organization is, I think, the key to success, even if it's in a client relationship as well. If you're indispensable to your client, you never should act like you're indispensable. You should just make yourself indispensable. A lot of people act like, oh, I'm indispensable because ego is talking.
Okay.
Don't let your ego do the talking. Let your work ethic do the talking, and everything, will work out for you. So, that would be sort of my thought.
And then one of the things, you've had these iconic moments where you were at the negotiation table. And what would you say would be your top, let's say, 3 tips when negotiating, especially these mega, like super mega, like mega church kind of mega contracts? Yeah. What would be your 3 tips to take away from this learning experience?
Well, I'm not what people would look at as a cutthroat agent, who wants to get every last dollar and leave you bleeding on the ground. I don't believe in that. I really believe that anything that we do should make everyone's life better. So if we make a deal, it should be good for me, it should be good for you, and we should feel like we're partners in this, so that as we continue on together, neither one of us feels like we've been taken advantage of, because that's a true partnership and that's what works. So, that would be my view. And the other thing I would say that's so important anytime you're talking to anyone or we're trying to make some kind of a deal or partnership is you have to get inside the head of the person you're talking to and find out what's really important to them. How can you serve them, in creating a partnership that speaks to their needs in addition to your needs, because your needs, but unless you know their needs, it's hard to put something together that works for both sides. Because if you just focus on what you want, then ultimately there may be some kind of a disconnect between the ultimate, result and what both parties want in terms of, the ultimate vision.
Yeah. Then you pivot. You're on basically the Mount Rushmore of agents with a Mount Rushmore client in SHAQ, and you have redesigned really what sports marketing and negotiation, not just with the team outside of basketball, what SHAQ is doing. And then you decide to up and kind of buy the AVP, and you come in contact with one of my favorite people in the world, Carrie Walsh. That transition, it seems logical now, but at the time, was that a big pivot for you, or is that just you were on to bigger and better things?
No, it was a big pivot.
Okay.
Because I was actually getting a little disillusioned with the sports agent business. There were so many entourages and hanger-oners.
Okay.
It just got to be a little bit of a grind, and I get bored easily. Like, I don't like to do the same thing over and over again. And I thought, SHAQ and I were having, look, today SHAQ and I are in partnership and we do things together. We even actually, our company, Management Plus, represents all of his kids under the NIL, which is pretty funny. But at the time, we just weren't getting along that well, and he wanted to go a different direction, and I wanted to go a different direction. And what ended up happening is I saw this opportunity with beach volleyball to take men and women, put them together under one umbrella, and create a culture. I love the idea of creating a culture that everybody believes in, and growing something where everyone believes that the whole is bigger than the sum of the parts, and that whatever you're working on, the why of what you're working on is bigger than their individual part. And with beach volleyball, it was a lifestyle sport. It had no money, but we built it into something that had money, was in the Olympics, and all of a sudden it became a flashpoint for gender equality, because when I put men and women together in 2002 under one umbrella, it Carey started playing, and Misty May started playing, and my wife Holly McPeak, who's a 3-time Olympian, was playing. We gave women equal prize money to men. That was the first sport to ever do it. We gave them equal TV time. And what ended up happening is the women's sport, the women's form of the game, got even more popular than men's form of the game. Carey and Misty went on to win 3 gold medals at the Olympic Games. And, so right now, by the way, women's beach volleyball is an NCAA championship sport, and the participation is going through the roof.
Mm-hmm. That is truly, truly amazing. And I remember coming to some of those events early on up and down the kind of the West Coast. It had a wonderful kind of, Coachella feel. There was great food. It was a great day of athleticism. There's always a little bit of drinking involved from folks, but enjoyed it. And then you guys took it on the road to Chicago and Toronto, and it was that is, you must be very, very proud of what you basically helped create, because it still, I think, stands the test of time.
Well, recently the AVP Tour got acquired by Bally Sinclair, which is this group of broadcast stations. So hopefully it'll start growing again. And I'd love to see it become a women's sport that could have mainstream appeal.
Back to this theme of fearlessness. What gives you the right to think that you can go talk to Holly, your current wife, because she was and is a badass of multiple championships, multiple Olympics? How do you get up the nerve to talk to a woman that accomplished?
Well, she actually came and talked to me. So I'm going to tell you. So it was, I think, in the 90s. It was in the 90s when I was representing SHAQ. And when SHAQ first came into the league, I think it was 1992, something like that. He was playing pickup games up at UCLA, and Magic was playing, and all these players were playing up there. And she had won a national championship at UCLA indoors, and she was coaching the UCLA. She was the assistant coach on the UCLA volleyball team, and so she was there. And I had kind of seen her around, and kind of met her, earlier, but I didn't really know her very well. She said, "Hey, you remember me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, kind of." And long story short, about a year later, I ran into her in Manhattan Beach. I was reading a book, eating dinner by myself. And she walked up to me and goes, "Remember me?" And I said, "Oh, yeah." And anyway, long story short, we started talking, and the rest is history.
Good. That's really good.
I got to try that one day. Remember me?
Read a book. If you read a book and you're a guy and you're sitting there reading a book, woman's going to be thinking, that guy must, be smart. He's got to be, he's got to have some braids. He's reading the book.
Exactly.
And before we get to what you're doing now, there's another interim step with Skechers. So you're changing sports, you're changing brands, you're changing verticals with a lot of dexterity. Was that intentional, LA, or did that just opportunity present itself and you leapt at it?
So there's a guy named Robert Greenberg, who is one of the most extraordinary entrepreneurs in the footwear and apparel industry. A lot of people don't know him and his name because he doesn't like public recognition, but he started a company called LA Gear, and it became the fastest company to go to $1 billion in sales. I mean, extremely fast. And he became a client of mine when I was a lawyer because he wanted to get into the sports and entertainment business. So when he was at LA Gear, I did deals for him with sports stars and even Michael Jackson, who obviously was the king of pop at the time. And when he started Skechers, I was running the volleyball tour. And when I stopped doing the volleyball, he called me on the phone and said, "Can we have dinner?" So I said, "Sure." So we sat down at dinner. He goes, "Listen, I'm in the fashion business, and Skechers is just a fashion brand, and we're chasing fashion all the time. It's exhausting. The margins are low. It's hard to keep up with the trends. I need to be in the performance business. I need to have function in my product because you can get higher margins, and it's just an easier business to keep pumping out every year. Can you help me with that?" And so I said, "Sure. I know the business pretty well." And so we created a plan. I said, "Look, it's a question of how do you take consumer trust and extend it? and extend it a little bit at a time. I said, why don't we walk before we run? So we figured out we're going to do walking shoes and we're going to go into running.
Okay.
So we were thinking about how do we get on the map, as a walking company. So we started looking for somebody to be the face of our walking product. And this intern came into my office and said, oh, there's this woman, you should look at her. She's, social media was just starting to grow. So I said, okay, social media, you combine social media with mass media, and that combination could be really interesting because Skechers was advertising on TV and magazines and traditional forms. So I figured, well, that combination could be good. So we hired this woman. We put her on, our Super Bowl advertisement. And all of a sudden, our walking business exploded. We sold 25 million pairs of our walking shoes. And this woman became really, really famous. And her name is Kim Kardashian. So when Kim Kardashian was an influencer, known pretty much for just doing a sex tape, we hired her at Skechers to be the face of our walking product. So that's kind of an interesting little story. In our Super Bowl commercial, if you remember her, everything about her was about the train wreck relationships that she had, right? So she'd have this
that's right.
with that train wreck. So the theme of our Super Bowl ad was really clever. Kim Kardashian is going to break up with somebody in front of 100 million people. Tune in. Because the Super Bowl ad was about how she was breaking up with somebody on national TV. Of course, it was her trainer because all she needed now was Skechers.
Okay, good. That's good. This is the Forrest Gump example of how this unintentional get to meet everybody. It seems like you have this intentionality and almost more of a divine purpose where this, as you look back in your career, there's steps in sequence as opposed to the randomness in the commercial. But coming back to, tell us what you're doing now, or tell the rest of the folks what you're doing now and how we can reach out to you, how folks can follow you. Let's talk about that a little bit, Leonard.
Yeah, so we're working kind of in the NIL space a little bit. And we're also creating an event, which is really going to be an amazing event. You kind of know the origins of this event. I'm going to announce it pretty soon, but I can't announce it right now. But it's a basketball event. Howard, you're gonna remember what we talked about some time ago. But it's about ready for prime time. But one of the things that sort of intrigues me is the way that traditional marketing, brand positioning, and creating a value proposition and coalition of marketing partners, how that traditional marketing works for personal brands in today's world that's got, this sort of throughput of influencer marketing and marketing technology. So in today's world, everybody who's a personal brand needs to think of themselves as a media company. So how do I create content most effectively? How do I push that content to people that want to follow me and engage them through that content so I can gain more followers, more engagement, and more power behind my brand? Now, SHAQ's a good example because today he reaches, I think, 35 million people across all his social platforms. And if you combine that with, let's say, a brand or two or three or four that want to become partners with him, you combine their marketing platform with his, and you have a tremendous amount of synergy there and power. And I go back to Kim Kardashian because when we put social media together with mass media for the first time, it exploded her social platform, it exploded our mass platform, and everything worked really effectively together. And when I knew this whole new world was going to be incredibly valuable is when she launched her Kim Kardashian app. And in the first month, I think she generated $100 million in revenue as a result of people wanting to associate with her. So under the new NIL rules, college athletes can profit from their name, image, and likeness. And my advice to a few select college athletes is if you have a certain amount of influence today and you're allowed to grow that influence and profit from it, let's figure out how to turn you into a media company that creates content across every relevant platform: YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat. And you will become more valuable. You're going to make more money. And if you do it really effectively, you can build an institution.
So let's go all the way back 30 years ago. Name, image, and likeness. It is so fascinating to see you and others help liberate these kids to own their own brand. But 30 years ago, when I was in school, it's you sign a 4-year scholarship, you give up all of your rights. You will not take a cheeseburger. You will not take an iced tea. It is a form of indentured servitude in exchange for a quote unquote free education and a chance to get a degree. If you're going to Podunk State University, who cares about a degree from Podunk State University? Most of us were trying to, stay eligible, graduate, and then go on to our next level of whatever professional sports that would be. The NIL, it seemed like it took so long, and now it's here. And now you're teaching these kids, including SHAQ's kids, how to cross-market themselves. What does this look like 5 years ago? I know what it looked like 5 years from now. I know what it looked like 5 years ago, but how popular could this become, or how liberating could this become, Leonard?
Well, I mean, look, I think much of it is overplayed because these college athletes are only worth as much as their influence will take them.
Okay.
Or they're the boosters who support the school they go to want to compensate them. So, for example, you may be a car dealer in Birmingham, Alabama, and you're going to want to, that student athlete to stay at the college, and you're going to give them a nice little local deal. So there's going to be a lot of that continues for the top athletes. Mm-hmm. But again, your value will be determined for the most part like your influence would be. So yes, they can be making money like an influencer would make money on one of the social platforms. And now there's a lot of people dabbling in it because they just want to see what's up because it's new. But that's why I'm working really hard with the O'Neal family to build out their capability as media companies, because that's going to give them long-term staying power. If you're just a rank and file athlete who has the right to make money on your name, image, and likeness, my position will be in 5 years you'll make zero or very little, because you'll just be like the average person. You're the average person who has a certain amount of influence, and let's see what you can do with it. So if you have 1,000 followers, it's not going to make you a lot of money. Right. If you have 1 million followers, then you can monetize that.
What could have Zion Williamson made? What could have SHAQ made when he was at LSU? What could have some of these?
That was SHAQ was pre-social. He was the first athlete on Twitter, if you remember. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But Zion, that's a great example. He would have made a lot of money. I mean, look, there's a high school kid, Mikey Williams, that has 1 million followers, right now. Sharif O'Neal has 3 million Instagram followers. Shaquille O'Neal, his brother, has 4 million TikTok followers. So, I mean, it's kind of crazy, but it's a whole new world.
Let me ask you a question now as we take a look at that world specifically in college sports, and then we transfer that same sort of philosophy over to corporate leadership, because now just as equal as these athletes who are building their brands online, we're also seeing the power and necessity of leaders in corporate to now become their own media company. Are you seeing the same trends? Not necessarily the same platform, obviously, but in that sense, that same necessity, especially in this new world where it's digital first and everything.
100%. So if you're talking about business to business, I mean, a great platform is LinkedIn because, you can, look, Gary Vaynerchuk has used that platform to get an extraordinary amount of business. If you are someone that people follow, and it's based on the content that you create, follow on those B2B platforms, then you're going to get more business, attract more business. So yes, I think companies need to have a public-facing social presence, and the better they are at it, the more business they're going to attract. Now, some people don't need it or want it. It just depends on whatever your business is. But depending on your business goals and objectives, it can be a very powerful tool.
Definitely. I think there's so many corporate influencers out there now that it's a different world, but yet it's still very effective and very powerful.
So Leonard, you've always been able to see around the corner. You've always been on the top of the wave before it crests. What's next? What are the trends that you see, in addition to the NIL and a couple other things, these cross-marketing platforms? Give us a hint. What's next?
Well, I think that the most important thing people need to do is have sort of this mindset of always learning and realizing they can't know everything at any given time. So if you're asking me what's next, I would say, the next iteration of the internet will be next. In other words, there was Internet 1.0 back in the 90s where everybody had an email address and it was very egalitarian and democratic and wow, this is the coolest thing ever. Then we evolved to the point where the platforms controlled everything. The Facebook had all your information, Google had all your information, they were selling it, so then all of a sudden, if you wanted content, you had to go to some centralized place to get the content. Now, with this new advent of blockchain technology, we're seeing a more decentralized approach to the way the world will work. So let's say you have your locker on the blockchain, and that's where you store your private information and your IP and everything you own. And attached to that locker will be smart contracts, which basically set the terms and conditions for how your information and how your assets will be administered. Really interesting, really exciting. You've heard a lot about NFTs, where NFTs is basically a representation of ownership that's transparent on the blockchain so everybody can see it. We think of NFTs as only digital assets, but they can actually reflect a combination of digital, physical, and experiential assets and set the terms and conditions of future transfers of those assets. So I think that's the exciting part that's about to unfold. And I'm looking forward to being involved in that in some way, shape, or form.
We've gone forward, we've gone backward, we've looked at all different aspects of your career. But there's one thing that we ask each and every one of our guests to get that iconic insight. So Howard, take it away with your famous question.
So LA, what was the best day of your professional career and why? And what was the worst day of your professional career and why? And what did you learn from both of those days?
Wow, that's a really interesting question. I would say the best day of my career was when I sat at the NBA Finals, the Orlando Magic versus the Houston Rockets. And I sat at center court and I was on the floor. And I had one foot on one side of the half court line and my other foot on the other side of the half court line. And to jump center were the two biggest stars at the NBA at the time, Shaquille O'Neal and Hakeem Olajuwon. And I happened to be representing both of those individuals. So I knew no matter what happened in this series, I was going to be the representative of one of the winners and the star of the NBA championship team. So that was kind of a fun moment. And I don't know what I learned from that other than you just have to, when you experience something that's super cool, you just have to treasure it. You have to share it. Anytime you have a success, it's way more fun if you have other people with you to enjoy it. Being successful alone, it's lonely. It's lonely. But sharing success with others is a joy. So anyway, that's number one. And I don't know if you want to hear my biggest, let's call it worst moment, but I'll tell you, and it was early in my career, and it involves Ronnie Lott. And, I told you the story about how I secured Ronnie as a client. And I secured him as a client, but if you remember from the movie Jerry Maguire, until money changes hands, you really haven't got anything yet. And I was a young lawyer, and I had given up everything and risked everything to represent Ronnie. And when he selected me and signed with me, I had no money in the bank. I could barely make my car payment. I had a part-time assistant who I was paying a small amount of money to, but I didn't have any money. So he signed with me, but he didn't sign his NFL contract yet. And in fact, he ended up holding out because we wanted to get a great contract for him and it wasn't quite there. And I didn't tell him this, but I was desperate because I had no money. I couldn't pay my rent. I couldn't pay my car anymore. I couldn't pay my assistant anymore. Then I was in my office one night and he'd been holding out for 10 days. And he called me up. He said, Leonard, I really like you. You know, it's been 90 days since I signed with you, but you haven't gotten this deal done. And you're a rookie. And everyone says that you don't know what you're doing. And if other people represented me, I'd have my deal by now. So I'm going to have to fire you. I said, wait a minute. What do you mean fire me? Well, these people are just trying to drive a wedge between us. You don't want to fire me. I've been working my butt off for you. I'm loyal to you. He says, listen, I got to do what's best for my family. I'll call you back. So he hung up the phone. I hung up the phone and I was like sweating. I was sweating. I got down on my knees and I said some really, really good prayers. I said, dear God, don't let it fire me. I'll do anything you say. Just don't let it fire me. So I'm sitting here in my office at 6 o'clock at night. The sun's going down. I was thinking, what am I going to do? Phone rings. It's Ronnie. Hey, Leonard, it's Ronnie. Hey, I talked to my dad. I talked to Coach, our coach that we know, Coach Morrison. You know what? You're right. They are trying to drive a wedge in between us. I'm on your side. We're in the trenches together. Let's go. Let's go with the money. You know? Okay. Oh, okay.
Amen.
That's the biggest bullet dodged ever. Leonard, again, the friendship is valuable. The mentorship is even more valuable. Could we encourage you to write a book? I would read it cover to cover. I know most of the stories.
I've written the book.
Okay.
The book's name? The name of the book is, and I haven't published it yet. It's called Managing Giants: The 7 Keys to Enabling Greatness. That's a fun book.
Fantastic.
Right.
I just wish I had been a better player that I could get a mention in that book and you'd have been my agent. Just think how much better your life would be had you had a run-of-the-mill journeyman NBA player that got cut multiple times.
You know, it's funny you say that. You know who came up to me, and I'm friends with him. His daughter's a volleyball player. You remember Adam Keefe, right?
Yeah.
Because he played at Stanford. So Adam comes up to me and goes, the stupidest thing I ever did was not go with you when I was coming at it, because he was a first-round pick. Remember Adam? He was. Yeah. And I said, I could have bundled you with all these deals with SHAQ. He goes, I know, that was stupid. I can't believe I didn't go with you.
I bet you there's a lot of people with that moment, but we definitely appreciate the moments that you've shared, and you started and ended the story around Ronnie Lott, which was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing these iconic insights. We really got a lot out of it. When you publish that book, you're coming back on the show. We need you back, because there's just too much to extract from that brain of yours and all the different places that you've pivoted and just left your mark in. So thank you so much for joining us. And for everybody else watching the show, thank you for watching Icons and Insights. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you. All right, Howard.
Thank you, LA.